To go with the readings for Chapter 3.2, I wanted to talk a little bit about jurisdiction because this chapter sort of leverages differences in jurisdictions to explain why the Mexican Supreme Court does some things and not others. So first I want to start out with a definition in general of what jurisdiction is. Jurisdiction is the authority of a court to hear a case. It's not the right, it's not anything like that. It's simply the authority of a court to hear a case, which means that it is the correct court to hear that case. It can hear that case. There are numerous types of jurisdiction that I want to kind of go through and sort of explain to you. The first is that I want to talk about is original jurisdiction. So original jurisdiction is the authority of a court to hear a case in the first instance. Most courts with original jurisdiction are trial courts. So they are the first court to actually have a go at a case. There are other courts with original jurisdiction, however. For example, the United States Supreme Court has original jurisdiction in just a few types of cases. Another type of jurisdiction to discuss is appellate jurisdiction. And these are courts that have the authority to hear a case on appeal. So the intermediate appellate courts, both at the federal and state level, have appellate jurisdiction in a wide range of matters. Some trial courts may even have appellate jurisdiction in circumstances in which a court that was not a court of record first heard the case. So for example, in the state of Texas, if a justice of peace court hears a case and the losing party wishes to appeal the decision of the justice of peace court, then a regular trial court will have appellate jurisdiction, as that will be the first instance for an appeal to be heard. What Article 3.2, Reading 3.2 talks about at some length is what is known as discretionary jurisdiction. Discretionary jurisdiction is one of the rarest types of jurisdiction for a court to have. Discretionary jurisdiction means that the court has the authority to decide what cases it wants to hear. Most courts that are courts of last resort have some part of their docket which is discretionary. The United States Supreme Court is unique in that the vast majority of its docket is discretionary, and only a few of its cases are original jurisdiction, or cases that it's required to hear. State Supreme Courts that have a large number of cases that come through tend to have discretionary jurisdiction. And what this means is it allows these courts of last resort to choose and pick which cases it hears. Usually there's a large number of cases that are appealed to them, and based on some decisional rule, they decide what cases it is that they want to hear. There are other types of jurisdiction that don't necessarily refer to a particularized court, and the one that I want to talk about at least before we go is what is known as diversity jurisdiction. Diversity jurisdiction is when a particular given case could be heard in a number of courts. Therefore, diversity jurisdiction. The case is ripe for any number of courts. An example of this would be, let's say, a federal case in which the two parties of the case reside in different states, or reside even in different circuits. So let's say Texas and New Mexico is a good example. Those are two different circuits. Let's say a resident of Texas is suing a resident of New Mexico. That sort of diversity jurisdiction means they could bring the case either in one circuit or the other. Now, why is that an interesting thing? Even for example, even in the city of El Paso, there are numerous courts that can have jurisdiction over any given case. Let's say it's a civil case under $1,000. I think there's no less than 3 different types of courts that can hear that case in El Paso County. This diversity jurisdiction lends itself to a practice of what is known as jurisdiction shopping. And jurisdiction shopping is when the individual who is bringing the case will choose the most beneficial court for them to bring their suit. That can mean that the judge is more predisposed to rule in their favor, or the rules of evidence are lessened in one court versus the other, or any sort of thing that can give the party that's bringing the suit advantage. So all of these types of jurisdiction affect the roles that courts play. And while the reading in Article 3.2 talks primarily about discretionary jurisdiction and mandated jurisdiction, I wanted to introduce you to many more types of jurisdiction, and so you could see how courts get to the business that courts do.